Kumlena Blat Gemara. Today's Hey Tevis, special day on the Lubavitcher calendar. And it's Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph Masechet Tainis Rotter 2 dots. We were talking about the Ma'amadis. These are the people who stand in Yerushalayim and around. And if you don't live in Yerushalayim and other cities, they went to their shuls. They would daven on behalf of the Eden. They read the Torah, and we'll go through it. Eilehin Ma'amadis. The following are the Ma'amadis. Now, who exactly were the Ma'amadis? There's a big machlekes between Rashi and other Rishonim. Rashi learned the Ma'amadis were made up of Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. All three of them were there, and they all participated in the Maimed. And others learn that the Ma'amadis is that Rashi said that in the earlier Perek, a different Perek. Others say that actually that the Kohanim did their work, and only the Yisraelim were standing by the Maimed. You know, the Kohanim did Avodah, the Leviim sang their songs, and the Yisraelim were the ones who were doing these activities at the Maimed. So it says over here, my comment, what exactly does the Mishnah mean? The following are the mothers. Eluhem mothers. These are the Ma'amadis. What are the Ma'amadis? Matam tik the Ma'amadis. And why do you even have Ma'amadis in the first place? So explain the fish and them. It says, "Tell the Eden about Marti and tell them that what do you call Tab Yisrael Marti? Tell them it's Karbani Lachmi Liisha. This is my carbon that you all have to bring, and you know that it says Tishmar Lahakri. When you bring a carbon, you have to guard it. So who's representing the Eden? The Heir Karbani Shalom the Karbu and Oimel Gabel. How could carbon be brought up in the first line of standing there? He's kidding being the shining. So therefore, they organized, they established Esrim Baba Mishmaras, 24 Mishmarais, 24 different groups of Kohanim. And we said before, each Mishmar was broken down into either 6 or 7 Bati others. I'll call Mishmar and Mishmar. The Rashi told us not even all the Kohanim made it to 24 Mishmaras. There were a number of Kohanim who were like there on call, but they weren't part of any of these groups. And every Mishmar, there's a Maimed Yerushalayim, show Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. There's a Maimed Yerushalayim made up of Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. And that in itself sounds like, some people, there's a third opinion that want to learn that it depends if they were in Yerushalayim, the Yisraelim with the Maimed, the Kohanim did their work. When you're outside Yerushalayim, maybe they're all made up of Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. Higias man mishmar lalos. When it came to time for this group, it was their week, their roster. Kohanim, Leviim, Oilin Yerushalayim. The Kohanim, Leviim would go to Yerushalayim to do their work. They're on duty. There were 24 mishmaras. Another 12 in Yericho. Sounds like a total of 36. In the future will be a lot more than 24, 36. Half go directly to Yerushalayim. The other half first, they would make a beeline to Yerushalayim. The other half first go to Yericho to buy goods and provisions. Half the Mishmar will go directly to Yerushalayim. The other half will go to Yericho. Why would they go to Yericho? So they can bring food and supplies for their brethren in Yerushalayim. Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, having Kohanim, having Leviim, having Yisraelim, ma'akvin is a carbon. It's critical for the carbon that you have to have these people. You have to have made up of Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. And Rashi on this again. Rashi seems to say Makas a carbon. Rashi says you need a Maimed from all of them in Yerushalayim. You have Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. And they're all the Bailim, they're all the owners, they all have to be there. Sounds like, again, that Rashi holds that the Kohanim, Leviim, all of them made up this group called Maimed, apart from all the Kohanim doing other things. Anyway, so you need to have Kohanim, Leviim, a representative of the entire Klal Yisrael. See, the Brais we learn. Rav Shimon Lazar says, Kohanim, Leviim, not only Kohanim, Leviim, but also Klei Shir, the musical instruments, Ma'akvin is a carbon. We already have Gemara Sukkah, where the musical instruments are, Ikashir of a peh is a vocal cord, a vocal, or Ikashir is the musical instruments. And so what's the argument? One opinion says just the Kohanim, Leviim, the other one says including the instruments. My committee, what's the argument? Ma'asav Ikashir of a peh. The main singing is vocal, and therefore having instruments there really doesn't make a difference. The musical instruments are just to enhance the singing, but it's really all about the singing. As long as you have Levine there, even if you have no instruments there, it doesn't really matter. And the Maas almost says, you need to have the flutes and everything else, and that's the main thing. Right? Taisha says an interesting thing. Other Rishonim say exactly the opposite. Or others understand in Taisha exactly the opposite. But Taisha says here that since if you hold an Ika Shira Bepeh vocal, then it doesn't matter who sings. Taisha says even a apostle, even a mamzer can sing because there's no instruments involved. If there's instruments involved, the instrument itself then becomes kodesh. If the instruments are part of the avodah, then the instrument becomes kodesh. Once you have a kodesh, only certain qualified people can play with it. But since there are no instruments involved, just singing, anybody can sing. And everybody's puzzled by this thesis because kohenim are not allowed to sing because it's the job of the duty of the Levim. So they want to say that a kohen singing is worse than having someone disqualified, a moms or anybody else, to sing. Because a kohen has another avodah. It's not just they're not a Levi. They have another avodah, and therefore, by singing, they're sort of insulting their own avodah. So some kind of a svara there that a kohen is worse if he sings than anybody else. Everybody else can sing except a kohen. That's what it seems to be from Taisus here. And I will continue. Says he further. So how did this group of 24 begin? Moshe started it. He set up Shemaina Mishmaras 8 groups. Remember, you passed away, so he had a laws in the summer, so 4 groups from each one. Shmuel then came along. Shmuel came along and he added another 8, became 16. Then David but then David came along. The next generation added another 8, so it's only have 24. How do we know that? Because it says in the pasuk that Bishnasu Abayim in the 40th year of David's reign, the Malchus David Nidushu they searched by Yemotzi Behem, they found Gibor de Chayom, the Yazer Gila. They found more people, strong people, and able people in Yazer Gila. So he's the one who set up the last tranche of Kain, groups of Kain, another 8. So he went further. Meshach has a question. So you're saying Moshe 8. Shmuel 8 and David 8. Moshe Tiglan Yisrael Sena B'Raisa. Moshe Tiglan Yisrael Shmoyne Mishmaras Arba Malaz Arba Mitamer. But David and Shmuel came along. Shmuel together. The Emid and Alesim Arba. So Shmuel didn't do another 8 and David another 8 together. Shmuel and David added 16 to make it a total 24. Shenemar says clearly in Pasuk. It says that Heima Yisa David and Shmuel are Rebbe Menassim. It was David and Shmuel who set it up. You're right. It doesn't mean that they did it together. It means between the two, it became 24. But Shmuel added 8 and David added another 8. Moshe actually instituted 16, not 8, 16 groups. Shmoyne Malazar, Shmoyne Mitamar, Uksherabu, Bnei Elazar, Abnei Tamar, when they saw that Elazar had many more children, many more descendants. And Itamar, Chalkum again, then Midim Elazar, he gave another 8 to Elazar, made 16 to Elazar and 8 to Itamar. Shenemar, and how do we know that's what happened? Because it says in Pasuk, Vayimotzu Bnei Elazar, they found that the children of Elazar, Rabbi, many L'Rosh Agavorim, Bnei Itamar, they realized that there were many more descendants of Elazar than to Itamar. So what he did was, he divided Lebnei Elazar, Roshim Lebeis Avos Shisha Asa. He gave 16. Lebnei Itamar Lebeis Avos Shmeina. Lebnei Itamar had 8 clear. Elazar 16 and Itamar 8. But I mean, there's another pasuk if you want to question that. Another pasuk which says, base of Echa, one family Achuz additional. Elazar was given into Elazar. But the Achuz, the original portion, Achuz Itamar, remained the portion to Itamar. What do you mean? Why do we need a second pasuk? It's pretty clear. The first one says 16 and then followed by 8. First they had 8 each, and then they gave another 8 to Elazar. Then the future Elazar and the future Itamar. Now watch, because you would have thought, okay, you're right. They both families grew. So Elazar grew from 8 groups to 16, and maybe Itamar that ended up with 8. Maybe they started out with 4, and they were given 4 more 8. You're telling me they actually began with 8 and continue with 8. No, they never increased. How do we know that? The more different brings out the pasuk, and that's what he says. Tashma, based of Echad Achuz, an additional group, LaLazar, above Achuz, the original group, Achuz L'Tamar, remained to Itamar. So Itamar didn't grow, and LaLazar grew. Heading more to you to the Rav Chama Guria. It's a question of Chama Guria. It's a question of Chama Guria. Why is it a question of Chama Guria? Because Rab Chama ben Guria before said Moshe only did 8 families. It says clearly here that Moshe Rabbeinu already gave 16 families, or 24. Amalach Chama ben Guria Tanaim. Actually, Machlekes Tanaim, because we brought a Bryce before that says Moshe made 8, and that's what I follow. That Moshe made 8. Says you want further. When Ezra, it's pretty incredible. When Ezra, after 70 years, the Jews languished in bubble, I take the word language, and I'll take it away because Eden didn't actually languish. They had a very in Babel. They were treated very well, and they were very affluent. They were very settled. So when Ezra came along and tried to induce the people to join him to go to Israel, nobody wanted to go. The Levim didn't want to go at all, and that's why they were penalized. That Machlek is whether they lost their rights to Meiser or whether they had to co-share with the Kohanim, and the Kohanim, most of them didn't want to go. In fact, there's a whole island in Jerba, with the Kohanim there, they were cursed because they didn't want to come and join. And they would remember the Avodah, the first Beis Hamikdash. They want to come for the second Beis Hamikdash. So out of the 24 families, only 4 families came. And some of the very chashuv families in the first Beis Hamikdash didn't want to go. They were scared, or they didn't. We don't know exactly why. Either they were scared, or because at that time Israel was totally unsettled and it was desolate, or because they were very settled in Babel. And they were, their roots were there now, and they were very happy. So only 4 families of Kohanim joined Ezra. 4 out of the 24 that were necessary. 4 families joined. Elohim. The following other families, they were Yedayah, Chorim, Pashchar, and Eimer. Rashi says he wonders why Pashchar not mentioned in the pasuk where it talks about the families that joined, but he doesn't answer it. The Amdus, what did they do? They only had 4 families. So the Amdus Nevi'im Shebeneim stood up the Nevi'im at that time, and the Chilkum, they divided these 4 families into 24. And then Midum Alesem Abo, they subdivided them into 24 groups, and each one therefore became 6. And they gave each group, let's say 6, they gave each one of those 6 groups a name. Bololum, they mixed them together, and put them, put 24 different pieces of paper, the heads of the Mishmer, and they put them into the box. But Yadi came a Yadi Benot Chelka. He took his own share. Obviously, he was the first week. Bechelik Chaveda Sheish. He took a total of another 5 in that order, and they became 6. But so the way it works, whichever name came up first, that was the first week. The second came the second week, and so on and so forth. And Shabbos is when they used to change. That's why the old group used to get a certain amount of lechem apanim, and the next group had a machlekes how many, and the next group used to get another group amount. Because they took over on Shabbos. But Chodim and Nodal Chelka, the Chodim came along, he took his portion, V'chilek Havedo, 6. V'chein Pashchar, V'chein Eimer. V'chein Hisnu, Nevi'im, Shebeneyem. And so too did the Nevi'im amongst them make it conditional. Shafilu, Yehoyadiv, Reish Mishmaras, Oile, they got, the Chum said, even if Yehoyadiv, who was the very most chashuv of the group of Kohanim in the first Beis Hamikdash, he was always number 1. Came the month of Nisan, he was the first week. Now, if he changes his mind and decides to come back, we're not going to give him back his position because he had his opportunity to come up and he didn't. So all those families that came up, they have first rights for everything. Yad will be Ike, and Yad will be only secondary. So Yariv might join another one of those 6 groups, but it'll only be like a secondary, like an extra wheel. So I think about it further, Yisrael says we recount about any because Ma'aser Bereishis, and then the Yisrael and that Mishmer would go in their cities and they would say Ma'aser Bereishis. It would read from the Torah. How do we know that? If not, Rabbi Yaakov said, if it would not been for these people around Eretz Yisrael going to their shuls and doing the maimed and davening and mispalel and saying, bring the Torah, the world would not continue to exist. It's a very strong statement. Shenemar, it says, because it's the kabbanas that save the world, and these mamadas are critical to the kabbanas because the Yidden that sinned and the kabbanas are forgiving them all the time. And the Yidden will disappear, then who do the Torah mitzvahs? Nobody. So the world will disappear as well. That's the cheshbon. So the world needs the Yidden, and the Yidden need the kabbanas. So how do we know that? And Yavram said to the Eibishter, how will I know that I will inherit Israel? Maybe the Yidden will sin. And you might destroy them like you did to the generation of the flood, the generation of the and the Jews will be destroyed. Chas v'shalom. Who is going to continue learning Torah and fulfilling your mitzvahs? Nobody. The world will disappear. So therefore, they read Chumash Bereshis and say the world is existing because of these kabbalas. Amalei, so the Lab Amal didn't. So they said to Ravasi, but then Hashem already promised. Amalei Lab. No, it won't happen. I won't do it. I won't do that. The Mephoshari want to know Hashem already made a vow that he won't make the flood again. Why would Abraham even contemplate the idea that he might make the flood again? I guess some people want to say that he said he won't make a flood the whole world, but this will be only targeting Eden, and that he never said he won't target a individual group. Anyway, tell me what's am I going to the ocean? I'm like, take me a third-born calf or a calf and a third of its growth, maturity of age, a third-born goat. No, you told me to bring kabbanis. Okay, I understand. Tiny base of English. There's no base of English. How are they eating going to do tshuva every day? How they're going to have a kapara? I already wrote down the order of the kabbanis. If they read to me, before me the pasha of kabbanis, I will consider it. I will consider it as if they read the kabbanis to me. And I will forgive them on all their sins. That's why you say kabbanis for mincha for shachris. Tell them what we learned. Anshe Mishma, the people of Mishma, besides reading the Torah, also how you mispalling, they would pray al korban acheim, and the korban of their brother. This is the korban tamid every day. She's kabul beratzon that Hashem should accept it willingly. Anshe Maimin miscancel basic nesses. So these are the Anshe Mishma. The Anshe Mishma, they were the ones who would daven on every single korban. That's our version. Other people have a different version. We'll see in a minute. So Anshe Mishmer, these are the kohanim. They would daven on the korban, the brother should be accepted, and the Anshe Maimid miskantzin lebeis hakneses will go to the shul. The yoshvin dalatanya would fast 4 days. Sheni v'Shabbos v'Shlishi v'Leviachamish. They fast Monday through Thursday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll soon see why not Sundays and Fridays. B'Sheni, what did they fast on the second day? They would fast Al Yerde Hayam, because the second day is about separating the water, so they would fast on all those people who travel by sea. B'Shlishi, on Tuesday they would fast Al Holchem et Boris, and they would pray for those who are traveling in the wilderness, because that's when the water parted and we were able to see the dry land, and they shouldn't be harmed by animals and so on. But if on Wednesday Al Ashron diphtheria, because on Wednesday it says that's when Hashem hung up the Ma'oris, the beacons of light, the sun and the moon, and when it says Yehi Ma'oris is missing above, which we learn in Gemara Sukkah is like it's the curse. So therefore, it's a time when people are vulnerable. And B'chamishi on Thursday, al ubrusum because on pregnant women and nursing mothers, that everything should work out right, because that's what it says. Yishu shoas sheretz. Ubra pregnant women shouldn't miscarry, and meinikas shenikas b'neim, and as nursing mothers, so that they should nurse their children. That's what it says. And now, others have a version exactly the opposite. That Anshe Maimed were the ones who would daven, not Anshe Mishmer, and the Anshe Mishmer would go to shul and fast. But the Anshe Mishma were in Eretz Yisrael in Shalim, and they would go maybe to shul and basic Knesset, and they would go fast there. That's what some people want to say. Okay, says the Gemara further. That's very interesting Gemara right now. Says the Gemara, why not Sunday fast? Because of the Christians. The Christians, they have Sunday as a holiday. And if we fast, if any Jew fasts on their holiday, they'll take it as some kind of a sign that you disagree with our holidays. And they'll find it, they'll say it's sacrilegious or worse. And the Eden can find themselves in trouble. So therefore, we didn't declare fast days on Sunday. I guess it was Tisha B'Av Shivas B'Tam, which was one off. It was not so bad. This was on a weekly basis. Interesting, Moshe Feinstein writes that you're not allowed to have any simcha on a Sunday. Like plan a wedding on Sundays, because Sunday is a Christian day. It looks like we are agreeing with their holiday. We're celebrating because it's their holiday.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The Gemara was written in Babel and Yerushalmi in Israel. Christianity was not a major thing then. Why were they even discussing it? This is before we came to the majority were in Eastern Europe and so on.
Christianity was already a big thing by the time the Gemara was written. In times of Mishnah, of course not. It was very early days, in the first couple 100 years. Remember, Christianity started by the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Tanai went on for another 200 years. And over that time, so you have Constantine, who became a Christian and made Rome officially Christian. By the time the Gemara was written, 500 CE, whatever, Christianity was all over the place. In Babel itself, maybe there were no Christians. I don't know the history of Babel, whether Christianity, made its way there. This is pre-Muhammad. Whether it made its way
right.
there or not.
But Ramon, but just to follow up that, we're talking about a time when the Beis Hamikdash was standing.
Yeah, but see,
Right.
true. But in the early Notzarim, you're right. The early Notzarim were all Yidden.
Yeah, but they were very insignificant.
Yeah, and they were all in Eretz Yisrael. Everything was happening in Israel. So forget the Romans, everything else. I take back what I was just saying. You're right. But the early Notzarim were all Yidden, and they were there and circulating everything else. And we had to keep some kind of and I guess in certain pockets of Eretz Yisrael, they were very influential. So they wanted to avoid any discord. So that's why they did very interesting. Yeah, so you're talking about in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, it's like really the early days of Christianity. But it's all, I guess, even the early days, they became very certain areas became very powerful.
Right. Yep.
So I'm just saying that Moshe Pascha's out on Sunday, you're not allowed to have a chasna. I'm wondering whether today, because it's sort of lost its religious flavor, and there's so many people today who are irreligious, but he would still maintain that line or not. Anyway, and in fact, one of the things I heard in the radio recently was one of the most novel things that happened as a result of COVID is that people are having weddings not on weekends, middle of the week. We were the trailblazers, and now many people are following suit. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. We have another reason. You know why he's not on Sunday? Mankind was created on Friday. The third day is Sunday, and we know they were most vulnerable at that time. From Shimon and Levi, they attacked Shechem because the people were the third day after the bris. And Ishlaki said, and the Neshama, he said, on Shabbos we have an extra Neshama, and then we lose it on Tzoi Shabbos. Ishlaki and Neshama, they need to buy Ba'ad Neber Shabbos. When Tzoi Shabbos, no Neber, on Tzoi Shabbos, we lose it. So it says Shavas Vayi Nafash. The word Vayi Nafash is broken up into two words. Vayi Nafash. War will be lost. Kimash Shavas. That's now that we rested Vayi of the Nefesh. War will be lost. And here Rashi says Neshama Yiseda. So Rashi says right here, Shemarchivim Daitoi. It broadens your mind. When it comes physically eating and drinking, you consume a lot more than during the week because you're much more relaxed. Anyway, so therefore, it's the leap, I guess, from Shabbos to Sunday is too great. From having being so settled and then fast is too great. So because it's an optional fast, we only start Monday. Obviously, when you have a fast tiny tzibur, we have no breda, but otherwise, optional fast, you start on Monday. So anyway, further time we learn Bereshis B'Shnaim. The first day they read Bereshis in Yerikia. So the Bereshis, which is 5 sukkim, they broke up into 2 aliyahs, and Yerikia Becha, they read from a Torah. Says you want to be Shlomi Yerikia Becha, I understand. Plus of sukkah, 3 psukim. The Bereshis B'Shnaim. Hey, psukkah happens on, there's 5 sukkim there. How do you divide that into 2 aliyahs? We know that every aliyah has to have a minimum of 3 psukim. But tonight we learned the minimum you have to read is 3 psukim. Is Rav says doilig. Rav says you repeat the third pasuk like we do by Chodesh. You repeat the third pasuk. So you read 1, 2, 3. Repeat number 3 for the second aliyah as well. And Shmuel says no. Pasuk. You divide. You split that pasuk in half. Rav doilig. He says you skip in my time aliyah pasuk. Why didn't he say just split it in half? Because somebody holds kol psukim, any pasuk. The le pasuk Moshe, any pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't divide himself, and non le pasuk we're not allowed to divide. We're not allowed to divide. So that's why there's a number of psukim we have. We ask why we do what we do. Like by Yom HaShishi Friday night. How can we start from Yom HaShishi? It's right in the middle of pasuk. So some in Minig Ashkenaz they start by Erev Vayivoker. Then we say Yom HaShishi. But that doesn't help much because that's still in the middle of pasuk. But there is by an asnachta. And because of snachta, we call that like a short stop. So therefore, maybe you could then say post the snachta in the trop. You could therefore start from here. We just start from Yom HaShishi. We will say like the Gemara will say when you have no choice. Yom HaShishi v'achul Shemayim. The first letter of every word is Hashem's name. Yud K Vav K. And we want to, when we bring in the Shabbos, we want to invite Hashem. During the week, Elohim is in reigns, and on Shabbos it is Yud Kei Vav Kei. So therefore we say Yom HaShishi V'Chol Shemaim. But we have this problem many times. In Zeis HaTorah as well, and so on. And they're all discussed in different places. The Chorasim HaBris, we break up that pasuk right in the middle there. The reason why we actually break up the minig used to be, my Ron brings that the moyel would come up to the amid and take over the Choras Ima Bris. He would take over. So even though it's the middle of the pasuk, there's a good reason why he would stand and take it over. Somehow or another, it became two separate parts of David. You know, by Baruch David became one paragraph, the Choras in the second paragraph, when in fact it's the same pasuk, and it shouldn't be split. Shmuel says, "Poisig midavai." For the Gemara, or mi paskinan. How can Shmuel say that we take this third pasuk and we cut it split in half? I had this terrible plan. I was a teacher, whatever it is. Like he only allowed me to divide the pasuk. I tried very much that he should allow me to, not to take a whole pasuk at a time. I want to help teach, kids teach. So I want to divide the psukim into shorter psukim. So he says to me, he said the only time that he will allow me to do that is for children in school. No other time. So how can Shmuel say we just split the pasuk in half? So Shmuel comes to teach, and Shmuel says, why are you allowed to break up a pasuk for teaching kids? So they actually have no choice. They cannot listen to the entire pasuk at a time. You got to split the pasuk so you can teach for them the pasuk. Here too they have no choice because you have 5 psukim, you need 2 aliyahs, so therefore you can split. Shmuel why didn't they just repeat the pasuk? Zayda, he's very worried about nichnos in exemption. People come to shul late early. If people come to shul late and they see that you start from pasuk number 3, they'll think, the person who had the aliyah before only read 2 psukim. Oh, we didn't realize you're allowed to have 2 psukim for an aliyah. So they'll go somewhere else. They'll tell everybody you're allowed to have 2 psukim aliyah. Or vice versa. The people who are leaving the shul, they've left after the first aliyah, they read 3 psukim and they know there's only 2 psukim left. So they'll assume the next person will read only 2. So mistakes can arise. What do you call it? So Teresa, however, says, when do we do this thing about repeating psukim and all that is sometimes we add a few psukim before to overcome this problem. So how come over here don't we just add a few psukim before, a few psukim afterwards, and that's that? So Teresa says you can only add psukim before and after if the subject matter is very similar. Not that the subject matter is totally different. And that's why Rosh Chodesh learned before. Taisa says from here explains, it's a famous question. If every Yom Tov we read after Kriya of the parsha of that day, we read a few psukim about the korban of that day, why don't we read every Shabbos the korbanos of Shabbos? Because there's less than 3 psukim. And so why don't you just add another pasuk or 2? But there's nothing around it that we can add to it. You cannot add to any psukim. Therefore, we don't read the portion about Shabbos every Shabbos. So you want further? Make less a question. Parsha shel Shisa psukim kainos. If we have a portion of Torah that's 6 psukim, you read into 2. So chamisha 5 biyochid. One person should read it. And if, let's say, you gave 3 psukim for the first aliyah, and the second aliyah should read the next 2 plus a third pasuk. In other words, we don't just repeat a pasuk. We give 3 new psukim. And the Yeshua others say the gimel that you actually have, you read the 2 remaining psukim, but then in the next parsha you read 3 psukim. If you're starting a new parsha, don't just read 1 pasuk, even though it's part of the aliyah, so it's a third pasuk. Read in the new inyan also 3 psukim. So I have a question about both of them. The one who suggested that Rabbi said daily repeat a pasuk, why read new psukim? Just repeat. Well, the man a place, the one that you split the pasuk in half for lif's sake. So the answer, Shiny Hustle, is different. You know why it's different? The East Lay Levacha, because there's a possibility, there's an option to read for another parsha. But over here you have no possibility. We dafka want you to read the first 2 days. We want you to read the portion of Bereshis and Yehirakiyah. Therefore, we don't want you to start the next thing because it's one of a Sunday and Monday, and that's why we have no bread. We have no bread. You have no bread. Okay. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah.